Before we begin, take a slow breath and let the day gently fall behind you. If stories told softly like this bring you comfort or help you drift into a calmer place, you're warmly invited to stay. And if, along the way, you feel safe in the quiet of this voice, you're welcome to follow this channel. No pressure, only if it feels right. Here, every story is told slowly. Every moment is meant to ease your mind, and every night, there will always be a peaceful space waiting for you. Now, when you're ready, let's step gently into tonight's tale. In the quiet town of East Hampton, there once stood a house that breathed like a living heart. Not haunted, not broken, not yet, just a gentle home where two women tried their best to stay afloat in a world that kept shifting beneath their feet. Before the peeling paint, before the raccoons in the attic, before the newspapers told their story, for them, there were soft mornings filled with sunlight, windows open to the sea breeze, and a mother humming old songs to comfort the pieces of herself she didn't know were already fading. Inside those walls, a young woman wrapped scarves around her hair, not for style, but for courage. She dreamed of stages far away, yet somehow always found herself returning to the same room, the same mirror, the same quiet ache in her chest. They weren't strange. They weren't tragic. They were just human. Two fragile hearts holding on to each other, even when life didn't. Hold on to them. And as you breathe slowly now, let this first moment settle beside you, soft, gentle, familiar. A reminder that every great story begins quietly, with people simply trying to stay alive in the only ways they know how. Long before anyone whispered its name, Grey Gardens was created with a kind of quiet tenderness that only a few homes ever receive. When the house first rose from the dunes, it wasn't meant to be grand, just peaceful. A place where morning light slipped softly across wooden floors, and the ocean breathed through every open window. Wide porches wrapped around it like gentle arms, inviting anyone who stepped inside to rest a little longer than they planned. The gardens were the heart of it all. Rows of pale roses, lavender swaying in the wind, delphinium standing proudly in soft colors that seemed made for early mornings and slow evenings. Even the wind wild and salty felt calmer here, as if it, too, understood it had entered a sanctuary. And for the families who visited in those first years, the house felt alive. Children laughed in the hallways. Women in flowing dresses read books beneath the arches of climbing vines. Men stood by the porch railings at dusk, watching the sky melt into shades of grey and gold. None of them knew that this gentle home, built for beauty and rest, would one day hold heartbreak, loneliness, and an unforgettable bond between two women who couldn't imagine living anywhere else. For now, in these early days, Grey Gardens was only softness, a dream untouched, a place waiting quietly. Are the stories it would one day carry. Long before anyone whispered its name, Grey Gardens was created with a kind of quiet tenderness that only a few homes ever receive. When the house first rose from dunes, it wasn't meant to be grand, just peaceful. A place where morning light slipped softly across wooden floors, and the ocean breathed through every open window. Wide porches wrapped around it like gentle arms, inviting anyone who stepped inside to rest a little longer than they planned. The gardens were the heart of it all. Rows of pale roses, lavender swaying in the wind, delphinium standing proudly in soft colors, made for early mornings and slow evenings. Even the wild, salty breeze softened here, as if it, too, understood it had entered a sanctuary. Families who visited in Thomas' early years felt the house living around them. Children laughed in the hallways. Women read beneath climbing vines. Men watched sunsets melt into grey and gold. None of them knew this gentle home would one day hold heartbreak and loneliness. For now, Grey Gardens was only softness waiting quietly for the stories it would one day carry. In those early years, the Beales moved through Grey Gardens as if nothing could ever touch them. Felon Bealcombe, traditional, believed the world could be controlled with order and good manners. Big Edie warm, artistic, beautifully unpredictable, believed life should be sung, felt, and lived loudly. And little Edie, still growing, watched them both with wide eyes, learning what love looked like and what loneliness could become. But tiny cracks began to form, almost too gentle to notice. Bills took longer to pay. Repairs were delayed with hopeful promises of soon. Parties ended earlier. Laughter didn't last as long. And the house, once so full, felt just a little quieter at night. No one meant for things to change. No one ever does. But distance grew between husband and wife, the kind that Dawson T shout. It simply settles softly, like dust no one remembers to brush away. And while the garden outside continued blooming, something inside the family had already begun to fade. Long before Grey Gardens became a collapsing maze of memories, little Edie had a life that shimmered with possibility. New York adored women like her. Bright, expressive, a little mysterious, she danced, modeled, auditioned, walked through Manhattan streets with scarves flowing behind her like she was carrying her own private stage. But dreams are fragile things. They don't break with would sound. They fade quietly. The phone stopped ringing. As often, directors promised to call soon. But soon never came. Loneliness crept into her apartment like an evening draft, soft button, deniable. And then came the letter. Her mother had fallen ill. Just for a short visit, little Edie told herself. A few weeks, a few months at most, just long enough to help her mother back on her feet. But Grey Gardens had its own gravity, a pull stronger than ambition, stronger than the city lights that once guided her. The moment she stepped back into the house, she felt the weight of all the unspoken things, her mother's sadness, the echo of old arguments, and the strange comfort of a place that remembered her, even when the world had not. The first night she slept in her childhood room, the wallpaper was faded, the windows swollen from years of storms, but she felt a familiar warmth, the kind you only feel in places that once held your happiest versions of yourself. Weeks passed quietly. Winter came and left. Repairs were postponed because money was thin, and each month something else broke. A window latch, a floorboard, a piece of herself. People say a cage is built from iron bars, but sometimes it is built from love, from guilt, from old photographs left on bedside tables. Little Edie never decided to stay. She simply never managed to leave, and every year, the garden grew wilder, her mother leaned heavier on her, and the outside world slipped further away. Until New York became nothing more than a dream she once held, a dream buried soft, fly beneath vines, beneath duty, beneath a house that would not let her go. By the time the 1950s arrived, Grey Gardens was no longer just a home. It had become a world of its own, one that grew tighter, stranger, and more demanding with every passing season. The decline didn't come suddenly. It came in whispers. A leak in the roof after a storm, a hallway too cold to enter in winter, a window hat wouldn't open anymore, no matter how gently little Edie pushed her hands against the frame. Repairs were always next month. And then when we have the money, and eventually, we'll manage somehow. But somehow never came. The garden was the first to lose its battle. The roses, once trimmed lovingly by gardeners, grew wild and thorny, stretching across forgotten pathways, like fingers searching for something they had lost. Vines climbed the walls, curling around broken shingles, as if trying to pull the house back into the earth that once held it. Inside, the rooms changed even faster. Floor softened beneath their feet, paint peeled in long, tired strips, dust settled on piano keys that Big Edie no longer touched. The once bright dining room dimmed, until it felt like a memory more than a place, and yet they stayed. When the electricity flickered, they lit candles. When the pipes clogged, they carried water in tin pots. When the wind howled through cracks in the walls at night, they wrapped themselves in blankets and whispered stories to remind each other they weren't alone. The animals came next. Cats slipped through open doors. With the confidence of creatures who knew they were welcome, they slept in corners, on armchairs, on stacks of old newspapers. And then, from the attic, came the raccoons, bold, curious, claiming the abandoned spaces as their own. Little Edie began leaving pieces of bread for them, because in her heart, anything hungry deserved to be fed, even if it lived inside her roof. Visitors would have seen chaos, but inside chaos were two women, holding on to the last parts of their lives, with the tenderness of people who had lost too much already. Grey Gardens didn't fall apart in anger. It crumbled the way lonely things do, quietly, slowly, waiting for someone to notice. And as the house decayed, so did the boundary between home and prison. The more broken it became, the tighter it held them to women, too gentle for the world outside, living in a place that was collapsing around them, yet still felt like the only place that had ever truly been theirs. As the house continued to crumble, something far more delicate began to fracture inside its walls, the invisible space between a mother and a daughter who loved each other so fiercely that neither one could ever truly walk away. Big Edie spent most days in her room, curled beneath faded blankets, surrounded by old photographs and sheet music that reminded her of a life she believed she should never have lost. Some mornings, she would hum a few notes, her voice trembling like a memory trying to return. Other mornings, she simply stared at the window, waiting for the sunlight to fall in exactly the right place to make her feel alive again. Little Edie moved through the house like a restless bird, wrapping scarves, pinning brooches, creating outfits out of whatever scraps she found. It wasn't vanity. It was Washington's survival, a way to remind herself that she was still someone, even as the world outside forgot her name. They argued often, over food, over money, over silence. But beneath every sharp word was a plea neither of them could say aloud. Don't leave me. Don't abandon me to this house alone. Their days fell into a rhythm that only the two of them understood. Little Edie fed the cats, swept the hallways, sang whenever Big Edie asked. Big Edie offered stories, old jokes, small comforts wrapped in nostalgia. From the outside, people would have said they were trapped. From the inside, it felt more complicated, a cage built not of cruelty, but of love tangled with obligation, fear tangled with devotion. Some nights, little Edie stood at her bedroom window and looked out at the overgrown garden, imagining the life she could have lived. Bright lights, open stages, a world that applauded when she entered a room. But every time she pictured walking away, she felt an ache in her chest that pulled her back toward her mother's voice, calling gently from down the hallway. And Big Edie, in her quiet moments, knew exactly what she had taken from her daughter and exactly what she had given in return, a love so consuming that it became both shelter and burden. Grey Gardens was no longer just a house. It was the third person in their family, clingy, unpredictable, and always hungry for more of their lives. To women, dancing between devotion and desperation, living inside a world that belonged only to them, a world too fragile to leave and too broken to stay in forever. 4 years. The world outside Grey Gardens barely remembered the two women living inside. Neighbors whispered, yes, but whispers tend to dissolve into the wind, until one day they don't. In the summer of 1971, the silence broke, A single complaint became a phone call. A phone call became an inspection order. And suddenly, the fragile world Big Edie and Little Edie had built was exposed to people who would never understand it. The inspectors arrived without ceremony. Clipboards in hand, faces stiff with duty. They stepped onto the porch. Its wood softened by years of storms. They inhaled the air that carried the scent of salt, dust, and something they could not name. Inside, they found everything the rumors had promised. Rooms swallowed by white clutter, cats weaving between piles of newspapers, raccoons claiming the attic if it were their ancestral home, broken windows taped shut, floors sagging like tired bones. But the inspectors did not see the way Big Edie's eyes lit up when she was asked a question. They did not see how Little Edie nervously smoothed her scarf, as if trying to appear presentable for a world that had long stopped inviting her in. All they saw were violations, hazards, reasons to leave. The report they filed was clinical, cold, full of measurements and warnings, none of which could capture the tangled love and loneliness that had shaped this home. Within days, an eviction notice arrived. Not a suggestion, a command. Leave the house, fix everything, or be forced out. Grey Gardens had been many things, a dream, a sanctuary, a cage, but now, for the first time, it felt like an enemy. That night, Little Edie sat beside her mother's bed, her voice trembling as she read the letter aloud. Big Edie listened quietly, hands folded on her lap, her breath steady, in a way that felt almost resigned. Outside, the garden rustled in the wind, the roses brushing against the walls, as if trying to comfort the house itself. For the first time in decades, leaving became a real possibility, a threat, a shadow hanging in the doorway. And yet, as fear seeped into the rooms, another force stirred quietly in the distance, a force tied to blood, to legacy, to a family name known around the world. Help was coming, but neither of the Beals knew it. Yet, news travels strangely, sometimes slowly, sometimes all at once. And when the story of Grey Gardens hit the newspapers, it didn't spread as gossip, it spread as shock. Headline showed peeling walls, collapsed floors, cats moving like shadows through ruined rooms. But beneath those images was a truth the world hadn't realized yet. The two women living in that collapsing mansion were Bouvier's, untied by blood to one of the most iconic women in America, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. To strangers, she was elegance, poise, a symbol of grace under unimaginable pressure. But to Big Edie and Little Edie, she was simply Jackie, niece, a cousin, a girl who once ran through Hampton's lawns with them during warm summer evenings long ago. When Jackie learned what had happened, the inspection, the threat of eviction, the humiliation printed in bold letters, she didn't hesitate. She didn't call for statements, or advisors, or damage control. She carried her sister, Lee Radziwill, and together, quietly, without a trace of judgment, they returned to Grey Gardens. When Jackie stepped inside the house, she did not flinch. She did not point or stare. She simply looked, really looked, at the aunt who had once sung at family dinners, and the cousin who used to dance barefoot on the beach. Big Edie, wrapped in her blankets, greeted her with the pride of a queen receiving royalty. Little Edie, trembling with a mix of joy and embarrassment, kept smoothing the fabric of her skirt, as if trying to look like the version of herself she had always hoped to be. Jackie listened, Lee listened. They didn't ask why things had fallen apart, because life falls apart for all of us, in big ways and small ways, and explanations rely matter more than compassion. Within days, repairs were arranged, crews arrived to clear debris, Plumbers, carpenters, electricians, all paid for quietly, without any need for the world to applaud. They weren't saving a house, they were saving dignity. They were protecting the last fragile pieces of two women who had loved them long before fame, or tragedy, or history changed their names. And for the first time in a long time, grey gardens exhaled, dust softened, floors steadied, light returned through the windows, in long, gentle beams, as if the house itself knew it had not been abandoned, lit. Tlaidi watched it all with wide, uncertain eyes, relief mixed with fear, gratitude tangled with shame. But the truth was simple. Family had come home, and sometimes that's the only kind of rescue the heart ever truly needs. As repairs slowly stitched grey gardens back together, something unexpected began to happen. Something neither Big Edie nor Little Edie could have ever imagined. Word of the house spread, quietly, through artistic circles, through filmmakers who adored stories that were raw, honest, and untouched by the world's polished mask. And then, one crisp autumn afternoon in 1973, two men arrived at the gates of Grey Gardens. Albert and David Maysles, documentary filmmakers, known for their gentle way of seeing people without forcing them to be anything other than themselves. They stepped through the overgrown path, camera bags in hand, their curiosity softened by respect. They did not judge the cracked walls or the cats weaving around their feet. They only saw two women living inside a world no one else had taken the time to understand. When they asked to film, Big Edie nodded with a spark in her eyes, a spark that had been dim for far too long. Little Edie hesitated, her fingers tightening around the edge of her scarf. Part of her longed to be seen again, to be understood, to be read. Another part feared that being seen might hurt more than being forgotten. But eventually, she agreed, not for fame, but because the house had always felt like a stage, and maybe, just maybe, someone was finally willing to listen to the performance she had been giving in silence for years. The cameras did not intrude, they drifted through rooms, like quiet observers, capturing Mo, her and daughter, as they fed the cats, argued about the past, sang old songs, and danced in outfits no one else would dare to wear. Little Edie, wrapped in scarves and imagination, became a living poem, her voice sharp, her gestures dramatic, her sadness tucked beneath layers of humor and brilliance. Every frame revealed a woman who had lost much, but kept a spark of defiance shining in her eyes. Big Edie, in her bed, became the soft heartbeat of the film. A woman who clung to memories, as if they were the last pieces of herself. The Maysles didn't ask them to repeat a line, or pose for a shot. They simply watched, listening to the rhythm of two lives that had long been hidden in shadow. When filming ended after 6 weeks, the house felt strangely quiet, as if it, too, had gotten used to being heard. In 1975, when Grey Gardens was released, the world fell into an unexpected fascination. People didn't laugh, they didn't mock. Instead, they leaned in closer, mesmerized by the authenticity, by the tenderness, by the complicated beauty of two women surviving in their own extraordinary way. Little Edie became iconic, not Becca, she tried, but because she was unapologetically herself, in a world that rarely rewards such honesty. And just like that, Grey Gardens, the house that had once devoured its own light, became a legend. Winter of 1977 settled over East Hampton. Like a long, heavy sigh, the ocean grew darker. The garden slept beneath tangled branches, and inside Grey Gardens, the air felt cooler than usual, as if the house itself sensed that something was coming to an end. Big Edie had grown frailer in the months after the documentary. Her voice, once bright enough to fill entire rooms, now floated softly, like the last notes of a song. She wasn't ready to stop singing. Some mornings she tried to hum, but the melody broke before it found its shape. Other mornings she simply lay still, eyes on the ceiling, as though watching memories dance in places no one else could see. Little Edie cared for her with a tenderness that came from decades of shared storms. She warmed broth on the old stove, held her mother's hand through long afternoons, and whispered stories from the days when the house was full of music and visitors, and laughter drifting across the porch. But time is a quiet thief. It does not announce its arrival. It simply takes. On February 5th, Big Edie closed her eyes and did not open them again. The house did not cry, but the silence that followed felt like grief settling into the floorboards. Deep, unmoving, undeniable, little Edie sat by her mother's bed for a long time, unmoving herself, her hands resting in her lap, as if afraid to disturb the air around her. For the first time in her life, Grey Gardens felt too large, too empty, too full of echoes she could not bear to hear alone. She walked through the rooms slowly, the dining room with its patched floor, the living room where raccoons once wandered, the hallway where her mother had called her name 1,000 times. Every corner held a memory, and every memory hurt. And yet, in a way only grief can make possible, something inside her shifted. A realization, a small, trembling truth. She had stayed for her mother. Now her mother was gone. And the house, this strange, collapsing world, was no longer a home, but a reminder of the life she had never gotten to live. That night, she stood at the upstairs window and watched the moon settle over the Ock. Ian, the wind blew gently through a crack in the glass, and for the first time in years, she let herself imagine leaving. Not running away, not escaping, but quietly stepping into a different verse. Ion of herself, grief, in its own painful way, had opened the door that Grey Gardens had kept locked for so long. And little Edie, with all her scars and all her courage, was finally ready to consider walking through it. When little Edie finally made the decision to leave Grey Gardens, the house seemed to hold its breath, as if unsure what life would look like without the two women who had filled it with so much longing, so much chaos, and so much fierce, fragile love. Buyers came, wealthy developers, architects with polished shoes, people who saw only land, value, and the potential for something new. To them, Grey Gardens was a problem, a relic, a structure too broken to bother saving. But little Edie made one thing clear: I will sell, but only to someone who promises not to tear it down. For many, that condition was unreasonable. For Edie, it was everything. The house had held her story. It had sheltered her heartbreak. It had been her prison, her stage, her mother's last world. You do not bulldoze a memory like that. And then came Ben Bradley and Sally Quinn, a journalist and a writer who understood the quiet dignity of old things. When they stepped into Grey Gardens, they did not recoil, they did not judge. Instead, they saw the outline of beauty beneath the dust and broken beams, a house that wanted, desperately, to be loved again. Sally Quinn would later describe the entrance as stepping into a shipwreck. Rooms filled floor to ceiling with forgotten objects. Mattresses collapsed into the floorboards, cat footprints on windowsills, raccoon droppings in corners that had once held flowers. Most people would have turned away, but she felt something else. A pull, a spark, a sense that this house, for all its ruins, still had a heartbeat. The restoration began quietly. Teams worked through long months, carrying out rusted cans, old furniture, boxes of letters, stacks of memories. Tea had seemed to sigh each time they were lifted. Floors were rebuilt, walls repaired, windows freed from decades of salt and dust. Outside, the garden slowly awakened. Vines were trimmed back, Aths uncovered, lavender planted again where it once grew wild, the roses, long tangled and forgotten, were coaxed into blooming with gentle hands, and as each corner brightened, the spirit of the house seemed to return, not in noise or drama, but in a soft, steady glow, like morning light finding its way back into a room that had been closed for far too long. When the restoration was complete, Grey Gardens stood quietly reborn, not perfect, not polished, but whole. A home that had been allowed to keep its scars, without being defined by them. People who visited AF Turwood often said they still felt the presence of the Beals, not haunting, not tragic, just lingering gently in the walls, as if watching with gratitude that the house they loved had finally been given a second chance, and for the first time in decades, Grey Gardens looked toward the sea, with windows clear and a future waiting. Long after the dust settled and the last repairs were made, Grey Gardens entered a new life, not as a crumbling secret, but as a symbol whispered across generations. People came from far away just to stand at the gates, to see the porch where little Edie once danced, to imagine Big Edie humming from her upstairs room. They didn't come for tragedy. They came for truth, for the kind of story that feels too strange to invent and too human to forget. Grey Gardens became more than a house. It became a mirror, a reminder that lives don't always follow clean lines, that love can be messy, that loyalty can look like sacrifice and tea. Sometimes the places that break us also keep us alive a little longer than we expected. Books were written, plays were performed, designers drew inspiration from little Edie's unique, fearless sense of style. Skirts pinned together, scarves wrapped like armor, each outfit a quiet declaration. I am still here, but beyond the fascination, beyond the glamour and the ruin, lay the simplest truth of all. Grey Gardens mattered because the people inside it mattered. Big Edie, with her fading voice, her stubborn hope, her unshakable belief that life should be sung, even when no one is listening. Little Edie, with her restless spirit, her unbroken imagination, her courage to be different in a world that demands sameness. Their story lingered because it echoed something in all of us, the longing to be seen, the fear of being forgotten, the quiet battle between what we dreamed and what life became. And the house itself, reborn from ruin, stood as proof that even when everything seems lost, every floor collapsing, every room darkened, every memory grown heavy with time, there is always a way for beauty to return. Today, when visitors stand in the restored living room, they often say it feels as if the Beals never completely left, as if their laughter, their arguments, their songs, their extraordinary presence still rest gently in the air, wove into the beams and the old wooden floors. And maybe that is how all stories survive, not in perfection, but in the echo they leave behind. Grey Gardens reminds us that life is enough, just one thing. It is light and shadow, grace and chaos, strength and fragility, all living together under the same roof. And as the ocean continues its endless rhythm, just beyond the garden walls, the house stands quietly, watching the horizon, holding its secrets, its scars, and its stunning, complicated life, a testament to two women who refuse to let go of each other, of their home, of the parts of themselves that the world never fully understood, a legacy that will never fade into silence.